Hello everyone and welcome back to another day, another episode of The Damage Report, still under quarantine. It's a Wednesday, big news day, always. That is a promise and a guarantee given to us months ago by J.R. Jackson, who joins me now on the show. How's it going, J.R.?
Let's see if I can continue to live up to this declarations that I make, because, you got to make sure, because people will never let you forget once you're on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not going to say that it's like the biggest news or anything like that, but we do have a lot of news. We have interesting news. We have fun news. And so if you like any of those things, stay tuned. We're going to try to satisfy you today. I see that a lot of you are already in the chat. Please hit the like button and share the stream if you haven't already, so that people know that we're live on both YouTube and Twitch, like all of the rest of the TYT network content. We're available at twitch.tv.
While you're there, happy people, shoot me some tips on face peeling, because over the weekend I decided to sit in the sun for hours and didn't put anything on my face. Showed up later, and then as soon as my wife saw me, she's like, "Oh, hey, look, your face is burnt." I was like, "Really?"
Oh, jeez.
So currently I'm peeling from like here to here to here to here.
Yeah.
So
you do look. You have a glow. I definitely noticed
the
glow.
You know why? Okay, that was the third part of this whole thing. Mm-hmm. So of course I asked my wife, "What do we do about this? Like, I don't know. What do I do with my face?" Because apparently every messy, unorganized person like me, every guy who has a wife she knows how to do everything about fixing your face. And she gave me 5 minutes. Like, wash it with this, put this on, and put that on it. And I think it's working.
Yeah, yeah. I've been doing.
You would never know that was a total mess this morning.
I've been trying to put on like powder when I go out or whatever, like the sun blocking powder or whatever, but I am very worried that I'm going to end up with a tan line like here from the mask.
Sunglasses?
No, the mask. Well, the sunglasses too. I'm going to have like a circle of tan like right here. I'm going to look like Trump. But anyway, that's my fear. Aloe vera would be my suggestion, JR. Consider it. Everyone stay safe.
But it doesn't hurt. I thought aloe was when it's burning and it's hurt. It never hurt.
I don't know. Just just smear plants on yourself. That seems to be the solution to everything. You eat some plants, you smear the rest. But anyway, aside from that, we do have a lot of news to get to. So why don't we jump into it? Feel free to continue commenting along. You can send in super chats and tweets at #TDRLive, and we will, of course, read those as well. And also, if you are listening to this in podcast form, I still love getting reviews on iTunes. Ratings and reviews are great. I love the feedback, especially the positive feedback, so feel free to continue providing that. And with that, we'll jump back into the news. For a couple of months now, Fox has been claiming that those lockdowns, the social distancing, the wearing the masks, all of that stuff that we all took part in together to save lives, that was probably just a waste of time. There's no science behind it. You heard that night after night on Tucker Carlson saying that the lockdowns had nothing to do with the flattening of the curve. There was no science leading us to start them, and no evidence that they actually mattered. He was probably the foremost purveyor of this sort of line of thinking. But he wasn't the only one. Laura Ingraham once said on May 4th, although intuitively I think it probably seemed like social distancing would be necessary, there was no real scientific basis for believing that, since it had never been studied. Yes, there was no scientific reason to believe that if you had an infectious disease, you should stay away from other people. There was no reason to believe that that was true. Well, JR, I can only imagine how much coverage there's going to be on Fox throughout this week, because there have now been multiple studies that have shown that those lockdowns saved an incredible number of lives. And I know there's no reason for me to cover it right now, because they're going to cover it in depth exhaustively. But you know what? Let's go through the motions. So 2 peer-reviewed studies have now been released in the journal Nature. One of the studies estimated the number of COVID-19 cases with and without the tough interventions, the lockdowns that were put in place. In the U.S. alone, the measures stopped 4.8 million more confirmed cases of COVID-19 and up to 60 million infections in total. In China, they prevented 285 million infections. In a second study, researchers looked at the number of deaths from COVID-19 in 11 countries in Europe. They found that 3.1 million deaths in these countries were avoided with pandemic control measures. These are scientific studies conducted by multiple groups, peer-reviewed, and published in academic journals. And so I'm sure if you were one of the researchers who contributed to this or wrote it, just have your phone handy, because Tucker and Ingram, they're going to be calling you up to come talk about the amazing research that you have now produced.
Well, the thing is some of those numbers come from Europe, Italy, European countries. So, of course, we know that those things have nothing to do with America. Hey, that science and those studies and those reviews have nothing to do with American stats, American science, because American science apparently has only thing to do with, hey, let's make sure that we have things that fit the narrative. And anybody who doesn't do that apparently is a liar, a scientist, and doesn't really do real research, doesn't do real science. It has to fit the right narrative, because you know what you will hear. You know what you will hear from Tucker and from Laura real soon, because cases will spike. The protests going on in the country are going to cause more cases to go up, just because that's the natural way. It's going to be tons of people in the streets. There's already some reports of National Guardsmen from Missouri and Mississippi that came into D.C. that weren't wearing masks, and cases have already hit specifically with those groups, right? So, of course, it's going to happen with protesters as well. You know what Fox News pundits are going to say? Hey, so you know what? All these people out in the streets have sparked a spread of COVID-19. And you know what? They'll be right. But you know what? They're going to have to contradict their previous statements in saying that people getting out in the streets and wanting to go and get their hair cut, it won't spread coronavirus. Hey, these things are overblown. Suddenly, it won't be overblown to get out in the streets and be around people and spread the virus, right? They're going to have to contradict themselves, because it's going to fit the second narrative of pushing back on protesters and people wanting the police to stop beating up on black people and murdering them.
Yeah, they're stuck between a rock and a deranged place. And the thing is, of course, as we've noted, the protesters, by and large, do appear to be wearing masks universally. In a lot of cases, the police aren't, and the National Guard aren't necessarily, but the protesters are.
I'm sorry, John. And this is the thing: many of those protesters are wearing masks. And then once tear gas comes, once batons come, once rubber bullets come, sometimes those masks probably get snatched down. Probably people trying to breathe from tear gas being blasted at them and smoke screens being put in their face. Those things will change the effectiveness of masks. Yeah. So maybe if the battles and wars weren't being initiated in the streets by cops and National Guards, and then as Trump wants the full-on military, if those don't happen, maybe we have a better chance of having people peacefully protest and then have way more of them keep their masks on their faces.
Yeah. I retweeted an article showing a spike in cases in Texas. There's a number of states that have a spike in cases, and not just cases. You expect that cases are going to go up as testing becomes more universal. Although, by the way, while testing has been increasing on average day by day, it has not universally been the case. There was a big drop-off just a few days ago of number of daily tests across the U.S. It is still a significant concern, but we have good news in that area as well. And again, I expect that Tucker is going to be pushing this, but a new study published today, population-wide face mask use could push COVID-19 transmission down to controllable levels for national epidemics and could prevent further waves of the pandemic disease when combined with lockdowns. So in some cases, you are going to need targeted lockdowns of areas where you see infections spreading, but people universally using the masks could help us stop having to completely shut down a national economy again. And since Fox says that's what they want to avoid, then I should see them telling people how important it is for them to wear masks. But they're not going to do that because they don't actually care, even though it is saving the lives of their viewers. As we noted not long ago, another study shows that if we had started our lockdowns just slightly earlier, tens of thousands of deaths could have been saved. That's just like 1 week earlier. We could have done it even earlier than that, but that's tens of thousands. And so thank God we did something at the very least, but still we've lost far more than 110,000 people. It could have been much better. It also could have been much worse if we had just gone with Trump's first plan, which was to let everyone catch the disease, and those who died, died.
Well, considering the only plan and the only thing he's been touting along with his supporters is, I shut down the border. I stopped travel. I stopped immigration. So that is his only claim to doing anything about this, which once it's already in the country, hey, you can shut down all the borders you want. It's here. It's so once, and again, that's a cause for like early action on it. And if we didn't, the fact, I said this before, the fact that numbers were what they were before he finally got started, if you did it in a better way, the numbers wouldn't be anywhere near that, and we wouldn't be hearing about it to the same degree that we heard about it. And then that's the no news thing that he's not good at.
Mm-hmm.
So once the news started, then he reacts. He doesn't act, he reacts. And a lot of times, once it's already bad, your reactions are even worse because he doesn't know how to handle it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just so like it's insane to spend weeks and weeks with your multi-million-dollar staff in studio telling people that masks don't stop the spread of disease and social distancing isn't necessary while they're broadcasting from home and all of that. But now that they've been begging to see people's, citations, now it's out there. They're not interested. Maybe there's a reason for that. That's all I'm saying.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, "You must unlearn what you have learned." And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
With protests continuing across the country, Donald Trump is facing pressure internally to do something, at least to say something. And while his past attempts to speak out on the topic have been just the worst, he's apparently planning to give a speech on race and race relations to bring the country together. And he has tapped, to write that speech, one of the most powerful racists in the country, Stephen Miller, who crafted the Trump administration's immigration plan along the southern border with Mexico. No word yet on whether cages will be pushed as a solution to the protests right now. I imagine they will be. But yes, this is Stephen Miller, white nationalist, who's going to be writing the race relations speech. We're going to have more on Stephen Miller, in case you are so blessed that you don't know much about him, dear viewer. But JR, when you first saw the news from Maple Ryan that it was going to be Stephen Miller's writing the speech, did that change your expectations for what it'll be able to accomplish?
My expectations were in a bad place before, even when I'm not sure if this was even being considered when I thought this may happen. There were rumors that supporters of the president were saying he should get out and speak to the American people and give a message of unity and cohesiveness in a times we're dealing with so many different things. And I said, no, he shouldn't. Absolutely, he should not. And now that's what a normal president would do, because people listen to a president to a degree because they trust him. No one trusts him. The people that do trust him don't trust him for the right reasons. They trust him to be a racist. So to come out and say something so disingenuous and in opposition to everything else you've ever said since you've been in office or since you've been in existence, no one's going to buy it. In fact, it's going to cause more division. I think there's a bit of a reasoning for this. Of course, with tapping Stephen Miller to write it and with having Donald Trump deliver it, because who else would, is to wait for people like me to then say, I don't care what this guy has to say. He's a racist. I don't care what other kind of terms he uses. I don't care how much he says he understands things. I don't care what kind of examples he gives as to reasons why we need to unify around something. None of it is meaningful. None of it he actually believes. He told us, if you tell us 1,000,000 times, I'm a racist, I'm a racist, I'm a racist, and then one time say, I'm not a racist, I'm not sure which one you're going to believe, but maybe the times that he said it, acted on it, and we watched him experience it and celebrate it. That's the third part. He said it, he acted on it, and he celebrates it. Now you're going to come out and say one time, hey, we need to unify around our race relations in the country. No, I don't really want to buy it anymore. We're not buying any more of your PR to have some kind of comeback on something and say, I've got 5 black voters. Mm-hmm. You should vote for me now. That's all this is. And it's just not going to work. But after people like me say that, they're going to go, look, you don't give this president a chance. He's trying to come with this message of unity, and you don't even want to do anything about it. Yeah, you know what? We gave him that chance a long time ago. Mm-hmm. He had nothing he wanted to say about it. There was people when he came in office that said, give him a chance. Black people said that. Just give him a chance. I mean,
Dave Chappelle said that.
Yeah, he sounded like a piece of garbage, but let's give him a chance. We've given him nearly 4 years of a chance. He's squandered that chance. I don't want to hear anything from you anymore.
Yeah. Quick fact check. He does not have 5 black voters. He has 8% black voters. We were educated yesterday. Man, that bar is low. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Hard earned. Yeah. So my question would be, and to some extent, maybe you already answered this, but we know that the last time he spoke, it was before the tear gassing, I think. It was immediately before the tear gassing. It was like a call to his base saying, I'm going to crush these protesters. You have to dominate the streets. Something, Second Amendment. Doesn't mention the first, but mentions the Second Amendment. So we know exactly what that speech was designed to do. It's been a couple of weeks. I'm curious if you think, is it just going to be more of the same, presenting himself as the law and order guy who's going to, he's going to put the fires out? Or is it going to be one of those speeches that will cause 3 hosts on MSNBC to be like, he's being presidential today. He's going to read off a teleprompter and pretend to care, pretend to support reforms. I know that it doesn't necessarily matter substantively which it is, but I'm curious which direction you think he might go in.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be much substance as far as reforms. He'll say we need to do something about it, maybe, because Mitch McConnell said that, and then went on to propose not doing anything about it. But he may say that at the beginning or at the end. It's one of those, where speeches go at the beginning, you say something, or at the end, you say something that has a unifying message but doesn't actually say anything. Every president, every speech writer does that. We know that. But in the middle, I think this is a prediction and an assumption, a guess even. It's going to be chocked full of, hey, black people, if you really want us to take you seriously, you're going to have to start to denounce and reject the looters, the rioters, the protesters, because that's damaging your message that we now hear. I think that's where the meat of it is going to go. And that's going to be his unifying message. Hey, come with us, stop being upset, and go our way, because we're looking to unify the country, which, again, means nothing. It just means stop doing it so we can all be unified again. There's no such thing as unification without any kind of change. But I definitely don't think he's going to propose any policy or even a hope for a policy that will change something in this country from the root of the problem, which is the systemic racism within our police force.
I think that's a safe bet. I mean, the question to me is just going to be, is it going to be sort of like you got to read between the lines, or is it just going to be like explicit, I'm your guy, these are anarchists and Antifa in the streets, I'm going to crush them, okay? We'll see.
Think about how conservatives responded when they decided to accept Muslim Americans or Muslims around the world after 9/11, after we have this spark of, hey, terrorists are coming to get us every day. After that happened, eventually what they said was, yeah, you know what? Hey, good Muslims, you guys should start condemning the bad ones so we can start trusting you again. I think that's the tone it's going to take.
Maybe. I could see that. Okay, so here's what we do know. We know who Stephen Miller is. So I'm going to really fast just to run you through a few of his greatest hits. Most of this is coming from a story that somehow didn't have an effect when, an email trove of his communications with Breitbart revealed how deeply intertwined he is with the right-wing white nationalist media apparatus. But a few things you should know about him include that in an email in 2015 to Breitbart, he encouraged them, Breitbart, he had to encourage them to write about The Camp of the Saints, which we've talked about on the show many times, a racist French novel, perhaps the most racist novel. It centers around a flotilla of Indian people who invade France, led by a non-white Indian-born antagonist referred to as the Turd Eater, a character who literally eats human feces. In one section of the novel, a white woman is raped to death by brown-skinned refugees. In another, a nationalist character shoots and kills a pro-refugee leftist over his support of race mixing. And the call is out that if they don't gun down, like just people on the beaches with machine guns, if they don't gun down all of these refugees coming in, that it will destroy Europe. And it does. because it's a cautionary tale about immigration. He was telling Breitbart, you need to get on this book. I think you're going to love it. He did that. But also, just personal information about him that I think is funny. We found out, this is from his time in high school, and I just think it's amazing. Once, to prove that men are more athletically inclined than women, he jumped uninvited onto the final stretch of a girls' track meet to show that he could beat them. It wasn't his school's team, because that could have lasting consequences. It was another team from a different school that came. He just jumped on the track to show that he could beat them. Students at the Santa Monica school also recounted a number of incidents at the Times in which Miller expressed anti-Hispanic views, including when he called up a classmate to declare that they could no longer be friends, citing the classmate's Latino heritage as one of the reasons they could not be friends. And he also, during a speech once, during high school, said, "Am I the only one who is sick and tired of being told to pick up my trash when we have plenty of janitors who are paid to do it for us?" He was dragged off the stage after that. Not soon enough, though. No, he is a small, petty, tiny, balding man. That is what he is. He's a pathetic, pathetic person who somehow has power in America, although no one other than Donald Trump has picked him to have any of this.
Well, it says a lot about Donald Trump. He said, I need someone who can write and put into words our shared experiences of racism, our sheer desire to spread it and to anoint it amongst all of America. He's like, that's the guy. They probably vetted him and they said, oh, this guy's perfect. Did you hear about that one time in high school when he told a Latino friend he can't be friends with him because of who he is? That's perfect. That's what we want. And he can write. Oh my God, Donald Trump can't write. Let's do it. Like, he's basically the Donald Trump who's able to write a speech. But the problem is we can see right through that speech too. But Donald Trump can. He's like, oh, this is great. This is a unifying message of racism in my country. Yeah, it's perfect.
You know what I wasn't able to find in my research? No one clarified whether he actually won the race or not. I mean, granted, he jumped into the end of a race so that he'd be fresh when they'd already been running. But the thing is, I know what these track women are like. I don't think he could beat them. I really don't. Yeah. So anyway, I wish I could know.
If he thought he was a skinny beanpole of a person as an adult, I'm sure as a kid in high school he was even skinnier and more beanpole-y.
Yesterday, there were primary elections in a number of different states, and in some, there were significant issues. Not unpredicted issues, but especially in Georgia, some of the lines were absolutely insane. I want you to take a look at drone footage near Atlanta. And so, JR, we can talk over this. Yeah. That looked like just crowds of people standing around, but no, that's lines. And you're seeing here spreading, and obviously, people are socially distancing, so they're keeping away from each other, but...
Which makes the lines even longer. You see this at your grocery stores or wherever you may happen to be, wherever things are lining up. And you'd be like, oh my God, there's so many people stacking out of this whole place. But it looks longer because of that. But let's not get it twisted. It is super long.
That's incredibly...
Even if you're jammed up next to each other, it's still super long.
I mean, when I voted in California, this was before it was too bad. Like, there was still social distancing and stuff like that. But it wasn't that bad.
Jesus.
And it was, I don't know, a couple dozen people, and it still took a while. Look at this. This is insanity. And by the way, not a coincidence that it's happening in Atlanta. Like, these states don't want people to vote in general, but they can be targeted in how they allocate funding, where they take the funding from, where they take the polling places from. Look at that. And these people are getting into the line. To their credit, they're trying to participate.
These are the people getting in the lines. So then there's, the people that aren't getting in lines we don't see. So it's hard to tell how many people would have been in those lines or walked up and saw that, or maybe checked out a news report and it's like, oh, look at those lines. I'm not going. It's a good number, I bet. It's just human nature. And then also the people who are afraid of once they're in the line. Like, I'm going to stand here in this line for several hours next to all these folks. I have no idea where they've been. And I've been trying to do this whole social distancing thing. It's hard enough to get Americans to vote. So whenever there's extra hurdles put in place, it gets even harder.
Yeah. And that line that you just saw, that is mission accomplished for state Republicans there. And The spokesperson for Georgia's Republican Secretary of State said that the problems are not issues of the equipment, but a function of counties engaging in poor planning, limited training, and failures of leadership.
Yeah.
So they screw you over by not giving you the funding they need, and the funding you need to train people for long enough that they'll be able to use the stuff. They give you machines that are prone to break down when simpler ones are available. They just don't want you to use them because they're simpler and because they're reliable. And then they blame you and your people, the volunteers, for the trouble, while disenfranchising God only knows how many people. We honestly don't know because, as JR pointed out, they get out of line. That's the way it works.
And this is a preview, as I think was talking about. Chris Hayes mentioned it. Stacey Abrams talked about her issues with mail-in voting, because this is coupled with, this is the in-person part. The mail-in part has many people seen issues with that too. So the certification process, the envelopes that come in the mail. So this is specifically Stacey Abrams' story. So you can believe it if you like. I choose to. She said her ballot came with the envelope already sealed. Mm-hmm. So of course, if you unseal it, it's going to be pretty null and void. Or if you try and unseal it and seal it back and put whatever your ballot in, they're going to say, "Oh, look at this, was tampered with. Stacey Abrams tampered with her ballot." So. And it sounds so conspiratorial. But the thing is it's if you have been paying attention to the way that they've been approaching mail-in voting and trying to make sure that they claim that it's invalid, you don't think that they're going to try and make it invalid when they just said it's going to be invalid, when there's no proof previous to this that there's any widespread corruption in mail-in voting. Mm-hmm. So they keep people from doing that. And once you see you have a ballot that's unusable, then you're like, "No, I guess I'll go in person." Then you look at something like this and go, "No, I guess I won't do that either."
Yeah, it's 100% like a sight into the future. This is what we're gonna have for the general. And the thing is, like, you can expect, they want as few people to vote as possible around the country. We understand that. We'll say it a million. We've said it a million times. We'll say it a million more times than the day before. But everybody understands it. But this is Georgia. Like, Georgia is suddenly, apparently now, a swing state because things have gotten so bad for the Republicans, and has an incredibly consequential Senate election. And so the outcome of the presidential election, the control of the Senate, could come down to Georgia or a state like it. And this is what you're going to have. And I guarantee the closer the polls get in Texas, the more money is going to be pulled from Austin and Houston for polling precincts and things like that. And I understand that, like, it's supposedly on us that we have to just overwhelm their ability to suppress us. But that's really difficult. It's really difficult. And in some of these close elections, it could be enough. It could be the difference.
And that's the plan. If you think this is some of the results of fallout from COVID-19, making voting tougher, if you think they're not celebrating it, you're crazy. They've celebrated suppression of voting since the beginning, or since they wouldn't allow people to vote that they don't want to vote now, women, minorities, all that stuff. So if you think that they're still not on that same vein, you're not paying attention. It's just the way it is. So they're like, "Oh man, great. The one good thing that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic was that at least there can be a natural way we can put hurdles in place for people not to vote."
The Senate primary race between Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy III has been heating up, and I have an ad I want to show you that really demonstrates it. It is an ad put out by Ed Markey, but it's featuring only Joe Kennedy, who has some interesting things to say about his primary opponent.
He's literally the champion causes that we've seen and experienced here with success in Massachusetts.
Senator Markey is a good friend, and I think does an incredible job representing our Commonwealth in the United States Senate.
Has he been a good senator?
Absolutely, he's been a good senator. This isn't about whether or not Senator Markey's made an important contribution. Of course he has.
I'm a strong supporter of his, and I expect that not only will he run for re-election, but I expect that he will win it.
And yes, filing the right legislation and voting the right way is a critical part of this job. When it comes to the environment, Senator Markey's been a leader on this, and he has been. He's been that national voice for us across the country, not just, especially, but not just on environmental controls, on greenhouse gases, on the BP oil spill, on telecom and communications. As I said before, the senator has made an important contribution to our Commonwealth and our country.
So no, you'd never consider challenging a fellow Democrat in a primary?
Look, in this business, I guess you never say never. I have a hard time understanding what those circumstances would be that would lead me to do that.
So that's, a collection of footage over the past couple of years. Now, of course, now he is just, a year later, he decided to go up against Ed Markey. And he said at the time he couldn't understand what circumstances would lead him to go up against another Democrat, let alone one that he considered a friend and a leader and a champion and all of that. And to his credit, he has not yet described what led him to make that choice, other than political opportunism and ambition. He admits that Ed Markey's doing a great job, but Ed Markey's occupying a seat that he wants. And so screw all the things that I said before. Now it's my time. I love that ad by Ed Markey. Very well done.
Well, it's hard when maybe he should have chosen a different seat, because I don't think he forgot he said all that. Well, also, I mean, there's the other thing. I mean, what's his name again?
You're talking about Joe Kennedy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that last name again?
I think it's Hannity. I think it's Canadian. I'm not sure. I've never heard of it in a political context. Maybe it's an entertainment thing.
And honestly, I don't know a lot about his politics. I know he's there. I've heard from him. I just don't know where he's coming from with a lot of things. So as far as whether or not it's a formidable challenge or a good one or one that's going to actually help that seat and the people that it represents, I'm not sure. But this is, and the one thing of that whole thing that maybe they shouldn't have included was when he said, "You never say never in this business," which means, of course, it's possible at any moment, because it's business, first of all, not politics, not in representation, not in actually doing something for people. It's in a business of moving up. If you want to get a promotion, if you're at an accounting firm and you want a promotion, you may be friends with Jim on the second floor, but if you can take his job, you'll take his job. That's really the way this is. It doesn't have much to do with anything else as far as principle and backing up what you said before. You're just being a nice guy at the time because you're being a good Democrat that's helping with the process.
Exactly. Yeah, and he's in his seat. I want that chair. You're in that chair. Give me that chair. I need that chair. I don't care about it. I don't care about being senator. I'm not interested. But like, there's another chair I really want, and this chair gets me towards that chair. That's all it is. And
it's a career.
It's a career. It's a career. It's like, you're already a representative. I know that like it's easy to forget that because what has he done? I don't know, and neither does he. But like, you have power, hypothetically. And we've seen lots of evidence over the past few years that all it takes is a spot in Congress with the right choices, the right words, the right actions. You can be a big deal. But he's not interested in that, and few are. Few are interested in being a senator. Look at how there are senators that haven't made the news in years. You don't even remember that they're senators, because it is so easy for them to just think, well, I guess I'm here. I guess every 6 years I'll get reelected, and then that'll be it. And then eventually I'll make a bunch of money. That's it. Some of them will run for president. The rest have given up on that hope. That's what he's doing. I want to point out one other person, though, because yes, he's a Kennedy. He believes that the White House is, his birthright or whatever. But I'm mad at some other people too, because how like Democrats aren't supposed to run primary challenges against anyone or whatever. And you're certainly not supposed to support them if they do. Hell, if you're an organization, you might get blacklisted if you do that. Well, Representative Mark Pocan, co-chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, endorsed Joe Kennedy against Senator Ed Markey. And here's the thing. We don't actually believe that primaries are necessarily a bad thing. They're certainly not illegitimate. But I get to judge you based on your politics, and I get to judge which primary challengers you think are worthy of endorsement and which aren't. Mark Pocan has done some good things over the past few years, but he also believes that he's going to make in the current political context, radical move of endorsing a challenge to an incumbent senator to get Joe Kennedy in. To get Joe, who thinks that he's more reflective of the Democratic Party today or where it's going. Nobody actually thinks that. But what Mark Pocan seems to think is that Joe Kennedy might be a big deal someday. He might run for president someday. And if he's given him endorsements early on, hey, maybe that's not bad for Mark Pocan. Bad for everybody else, but maybe good for Pocan.
And it's back to that career move. Pocan wants to get on. He's like, oh man, a Kennedy. Everybody's going to vote for him. I might as well get on board early because I got to get on this train. That's the way it works. Or maybe I can go somewhere else next and do something else here. There's so many things. And again, as long as you have enough of a name recognition, it's how it works in this country and probably everywhere else. You get a chance no matter what else. So again, don't back off of being okay with primaries. I don't think anybody's necessarily doing that. But the primary will allow people to see where it is you're coming from and what it is you want. Now you got to prove yourself. You can't just come up there and say, hey, my name is Kennedy. Good, let's go. Maybe he'll get on board. Maybe he'll become progressive. Who knows, right? Because I think what maybe some politicians are beginning to see is people are paying more attention to what their policies are. Slowly, they're beginning to realize that. Not completely, but they're slowly beginning to realize that people are paying attention to policy and that people are beginning to vote based off of that a lot more than just saying, oh, yeah, I remember my great-grandfather voted for this guy named Kennedy. It's getting a little bit detached from that now, I think, for many Americans. You know, that's a long time ago now. Not super long time ago, but long enough ago where we're like, yeah, well, my grandfather told me doesn't have much to do with what I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, some of the past Kennedys were, like, for all their other issues, and obviously there were a lot, they were, like, inspiring speakers or whatever. Right. This guy's had opportunities. He's been given a national stage. If he was going to wow us, he would have wowed us. And he could have, by the way. He could have made the decision at 20, when he was already planning to be president someday. He could have taken a look around the country and thought, you know, I know where the country is going. I'm not going to just be one of those, you know, go along to get along, you know, following the donors, corporate establishment Dems. He could have chosen to use his name and the platform it gave him to be a true progressive. Hypothetically, imagine the power of that, how far he could have gone. But he chose not to. And so this is the response he's going to get.
Yeah, well, we'll see if he switches back. Or not back, but switches.
Well, if he does, we will remember. But we will see. Last night on his program, Sean Hannity wanted to make a comparison between Trump and George Floyd and the treatment they have received from cops. Now, he's not saying it's the same. He's not saying it's the same. Well, definitely saying it's the same.
And yes, there are bad apples within some police departments. There are dirty cops. In fact, no program on cable news, on the radio, has spent more time exposing the bad actors on the federal level. 7th floor, FBI, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page. Remember those names? Yes. They abused their power. And by the way, we have been fully vindicated on our reporting. And, of course, all the corruption. They used their power and influence to what? To first stop one candidate from being elected, then overturning an election? Seriously? In the United States of America. Yep. What did Joe DeGeneva say? Dirty cops. And the president himself, it's not the same thing as what happened to George Floyd, but it's horrific. He was a victim of crooked cops. Now, again, not the same circumstances. I'm not making any comparison. A bad cop is a bad cop. And by all means, by the way, the damage was real to the country. The damage in Minneapolis is real to the country. And that the case, what was done in George Floyd case, should never happen. We know how a few malignant individuals can destroy lives and wreak havoc.
Okay, I'm not saying it's the same in the middle of a multi-minute rant about like how unfair it was to Trump that these bad apples in law enforcement targeted him and tried to destroy his election. He also said that someone was stopped from getting elected and then they tried to overturn election. Was he saying that they interfered with Hillary Clinton? Was that the admission that he was saying there? What if not? What candidate? I don't know what candidate he's talking about. He's
talking about Trump.
Yeah,
like it's a part of his well vetted and confirmed reporting. And that he somehow says was exonerated his coverage, where he continued to go on and on about how Trump was trying to get derailed from getting elected. And once he was elected, you know, the things that came out about what he did all the way up to Ukraine was an attempt to get him kicked out because this was to subvert his winning election. That's all he's saying. Because once you hold someone like Donald Trump accountable, what you're doing is trying to destroy his presidency. I think Donald Trump tried to destroy his presidency when he did illegal things. Again, the consequences are never considered to be put on the person who did the act in the first place. It's on the people who said so. I don't think Sean Hannity realized that as he's pointing out his calling of bad cops in the federal level is picking and choosing and actually makes him look worse. He's like, I'm just calling bad cops to the people who hurt the people that I want to help continue to be corrupt, not the people who are actually in the streets being beaten up and killed by them. No, that's a whole different thing. Yeah, those cops. Yeah, well, yeah, there's a couple of those, but I'm talking about the federal level ones. Hey, that's a hypocritical statement, you idiot.
Yeah, it's also amazing that like in the middle of a speech where he was saying that what happened to George Floyd was wrong, which automatically puts him head and shoulders above any of the other hosts on Fox News. They might have once or twice pretended to care about that, but Sean Hannity at least regularly pretends to actually be bothered by that. That's preferable, I guess. But also, he is still using the bad apples thing. Isn't that madness?
Yep.
That after everything that the country has been through, how many video montages of cops just casually pepper spraying people, brutally beating people, groups of cops beating someone who's not fighting back? How many shots of them trying to run down protesters with their cars? How much of this do we need before we finally retire the bad apples thing? And maybe just come up with another condescending metaphor to use. Like, just be a little bit fresh. That metaphor is a bad apple at this point. It's rotten.
I have an idea. Let's go with bruised banana. How about that?
It's a dark bruised banana, exactly.
And did you notice the one federal cop that he didn't point out that's doing bad things is William Barr? I wonder why he didn't point that guy
He's not bothered by that.
Who's got bad actions and who's been doing things against American people. No, that guy is not a bad cop because he fits your narrative. So your bad cop thing is based off of people who help your president do illegal things.
100%, yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. I try to be able to recognize and make clear the distinctions between bad things. So Tucker Carlson's show is just white supremacy. That's what it is. It's designed to elevate whites. That's it. Sean Hannity, he's totally for a lot of that stuff, but his show, the mission really is demonstrated so perfectly there that it is just deference to Donald Trump and distraction for the viewers. So we have nationwide 50-state protests against police brutality. The overwhelming majority of the population now accepts it, believes that something needs to be done. And what does his show do? It says, oh yeah, bad that guy got killed, but the true bad cops are Page and Strzok in their sexy texts, and they tried to interfere with... Like, that has nothing to do with anything.
Nope.
That is not... Nobody cares about that. That's not what's ruining people's lives. But he takes his millions of viewers and says, ignore all of what's going on and the obvious systemic discrimination, and instead, here's some sexy texts and some Page and Strzok and dirty cops. That's what's really... It's the distraction element. It's different forms of state TV. One upholds the racial hierarchy that the Republican Party is based on. The other is just, bread and circuses to distract people so that they don't get awakened by what they're seeing.
It goes back to the Central Park lady that I just talked about again.
Mm-hmm.
You're ruining my life by trying to hold me accountable when you just literally tried to ruin someone else's life. In fact, end their lives. So the level of outrage based on it is only because it affects me now. This is a serious situation. What you were just doing is not. It's just a problem. It's just a little thing. It's just this one isolated incident with this one isolated bad cop. But I'm telling you, the way you guys came after my president was unprecedented, and no president has ever been treated like this. It's going to be a disaster. Look how the country was destroyed by it. Mm-hmm. In what way? In what way? But George Floyd we just had a funeral for him yesterday. He's not here anymore. What part of his life got destroyed that this guy who's literally sitting in the White House still now, his life has been destroyed, but someone's not here anymore? You're going to compare those two.
Yeah, his life has been destroyed. He live tweeted what Fox was covering and not covering at 11 a.m. local time today. As Chris Hayes pointed out, you're the president of the United States. It's a weekday. You're supposed to be working. At 11, you're watching Fox News. Mm-hmm. But that's what he's doing. This is one of the most embarrassing things I have ever seen on the mainstream media coming from the right. Tucker Carlson has been triggered by a great many things over the years. But in the video you're about to watch, he is literally triggered by Elmo.
But for now, it's enough to say that the country's defenses have been badly weakened by decades of relentless propaganda, all of it designed to make us feel that we have no right to stand up for ourselves, to stand up for our country. We are too sinful to resist. We deserve whatever we get. Shut up and take it, America. We could spend days showing you examples of this, but here's just the very latest. It's from CNN over the weekend.
Oh. Yeah, I'm bringing this sign to the protest at the community center later.
Oh. They look upset. Are the protesters sad?
They are sad and upset. And they have every right to be, Elmo. People are upset because racism is a huge problem in our country. Across the country, people of color, especially in the black community, are being treated unfairly because of how they look.
It's a children's show. Got that, Bobby? America is a very bad place, and it's your fault. So no matter what happens, no matter what they do to you when you grow up, you have no right to complain. That's the message, and it starts very young. Where does it end up? Exactly, we're finding out.
Okay. So that's not fake. Parker Malloy didn't make that. He played a clip of Elmo and a guy telling Elmo the protesters are angry and upset, and that makes sense. It's understandable. And Tucker he thought he was making a great point about American society. Where am I? What year is it? It's madness. What has SpongeBob done recently, Tucker? Tell us about it.
Yep, and his problem is that kids maybe get told something about their country that isn't all roses and butterflies and calls for that we're this superior nation that does everything right. That's what we've always been told. That's why people like Tucker Carlson are sitting there in their seat telling everyone the same thing, that same lie, so that even the reality in everyone's face of what we're seeing, we're like, don't listen to that reality. Don't tell your kids that there's a problem. And the irony in that whole thing and his response of what his take from what he got from that Sesame Street episode was, hey, Bobby, no matter what happens to you, no matter how much your country comes for you, you can't complain about it. Mm-hmm. Tucker, that's exactly what you're telling kids of the oppressed folks in this country right now. Don't talk
100%.
Don't go protest. Don't say we need to change things, because just sit back and take it. He somehow flips that on his head and thinks that, hey, who's going to protect the oppressors?
Yeah.
Who's going to look out for people like me who are trying to keep people down, who are trying to continue to allow police brutality to happen and murders to happen? Who's going to look out for me? Hey, you're the bad guy. Nobody looks out for the bad guy except for other bad guys.
So this is the danger of bringing Jared Jackson on, is he only makes exactly the point I wanted to make. No, 100%. 100%. 100%. The chat, I've been watching the chat, and they've pointed out two important things. One, Elmo's definitely Antifa. But two, what Tucker said had nothing to do with the clip that he played. Like, I don't know, sometimes the wrong clip comes up and you just have to roll with it. But that's not what Elmo's dad was telling Elmo. But if we just take what Tucker said, you're 100% right. Both before and after the clip, he said the lesson is, the left is telling you to just take it. Don't complain. Whatever you did, it's your fault. You can't change anything. Just take it. No, people are protesting. They have taken it for long enough, and they are standing up. And that is something that Tucker occasionally understands, because he, of course, supported the anti-lockdown protests, loved the Tea Party. Like, he loves certain protests, but only for some reason that I can't put my finger on. There's something about this protest that he thinks not only isn't demonstrating that most essential of American things, protesting in the streets when you see injustice that the system will not fix itself. By the way, it's the same thing with the sex talk people like to have, right? If you don't talk to your kids about racism, someone else will. So if you say Bobby is too young to learn about racism at 5 to 7 years old, trust me, he's heard about it from someone else who said the words, who have the stereotypes pushed in their brains, from teachers who have said things to them and treated them a certain way. Trust me, people have talked to your kids about racism, and they've talked to them about it in negative ways. So when someone talks about it in a way to recognize it and to alleviate and maybe do something differently, therein lies the problem. Trust me, someone has talked to your kid about racism and the things that they've said you don't want to hear. You probably remember yesterday Donald Trump spreading conspiracy theories to justify police brutality against a 75-year-old that landed a peace activist in the hospital, apparently still in the hospital, in critical condition, saying, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but effectively saying that protester, Martin Gugino, might be Antifa, and then he might have been planning to in some way assault a mob of police officers by himself. Yes, our greatest fears have come true. Antifa has been training 75-year-old super soldiers. So that's what he said. And most Republicans ran from questions about this because they didn't want to have anything to do with this. Some criticized him, including Mitt Romney. But one person has a contractual obligation to defend him, Kayleigh McEnany, who told you she'd never lie to you. Here is her response to questions about that tweet.
Could you expand on that? Does the president think that this guy is part of Antifa? So the president was raising questions based on a report that he saw. There are questions that need to be asked. In every case, we can't jump on one side without looking at all the facts at play. This individual had some very questionable tweets, some profanity-laden tweets about police officers. Of course, no one condones any sort of violence. We need the appropriate amount of force used in any interaction. But there are a lot of questions in that case. In fact, you had 56 police officers who resigned in protest of how their fellow officers were treated. So I think we need to ask why those officers resigned, what happened, what facts were on the ground, and the president was just raising some of those questions.
That's all he was doing. He was just raising questions about a report, JR.
From OAN.
A report. I mean, I guess there was a camera rolling, and they were talking into it, and they were dressed fancy, so I guess it's kind of like a report. But just because you gave some psychopaths enough money to broadcast a signal to TV stations, that doesn't make it a report, really. He heard conspiracy theories from, I think the site that they come from is literally like Conservative Treehouse or something like that. You couldn't come up with a more ridiculous sounding thing. He's just raising questions. That's what the president is supposed to do. He's not supposed to get answers from the more than a dozen intelligence services he has, or the DOJ, or any of this. He's supposed to listen to what the news blasts into his face, the news, and then he's just supposed to, off the hip start tweeting, conspiracy theories about a 75-year-old who'd been brutalized. That's what we should expect from our leadership.
Because the president should be taking any part in talking about this incident where the cops attacked this guy in one particular city, and now your approach is to dog out the person who did so. So if it doesn't highlight exactly where he lands on all these things with the protests, the police brutality, all that, he's making sure that his supporters know where he lands on it. That's really the main reason for this. But like, hey, you guys, yes, you saw this horrific video that maybe even will make some other white folks who haven't been horrified yet finally be horrified because this guy looks like them. I need to go out and jump in front of this and attack, because we can't have any more allyship. We can't have any more people that actually see what's going on. Because I think someone tweeted, this is one of the best tweets I've seen in a while. They said, it's been a week of police treating white folks the way that they've always treated black folks. And now we're ready to defund the police and to tear them apart and take them down, because white folks have finally seen and experienced to a degree what's happened to black folks in this whole time. And they're like, man, I was just standing there and he hit me in my head. Yeah. Like, I didn't even do anything. Yes, those are the stories that we've been telling since forever. So now it's become a collective storytelling of the same experience. And they're like, we got to do something about this. You know what's happening here? Did you see what's happening in these streets?
Yeah,
it's happening. And
I think it just
push back.
I think it just started, actually. I think he was the first. No, you're 100% right. And that's why Fox has done so much work to attack the protests while not showing you footage of what's actually happening.
Absolutely.
It is the most cowardly, intellectually bankrupt exercise I've seen in media for a long time. All those people who consider themselves critical thinkers who engage with the other side, they always want to debate you after all. I'd love to see Ben Shapiro debate video of skulls being cracked open and tear gas, being sprayed in people's faces when they're already kneeling on the ground. Debate those. Debate the actual reality of what's going on. No, he won't. He's cowering, hiding, trying to hope, please let my audience not see this, because then they'll realize that I haven't been showing them. They'll wonder why. Why, if I'm so well equipped to use logic and reason and facts to fight back against the out of control left, why am I pretending that all this stuff isn't happening when everyone can see with their own eyes that it is? That's what Fox News and the independent right-wing media are doing. And Donald Trump is just a product of all of that.
Yeah, once you're wrapped up in it, by the way, Kayleigh McEnany's whole line about the 57 police officers who resigned, little does she know that's and that's an indictment of the racist policy, of the racist systematic racism in the police force. If you're going to resign because these two cops, after shoving this guy on his head and walking over him while he's bleeding, is the reason for you to resign, you're a bad guy. This isn't a story to tell and be like, you know what? So then 57 officers, they all resigned after these two criminal cops did what they did. Hey, that tells me that whole group of 57 cops, good riddance, get out. You're the next ones to do it. If you're in support of that, that means you're willing to do it too. And if you're willing to support them doing it, you're another bad guy. Get out.
You're 100% right. Yeah. So if other bad cops think that we should have been nicer to this bad cop that implies that the cops are probably all good and Martin Gugino's bad. What weird world. Let's say he had some kind of scanner in his hand. He didn't. He's literally a peace activist who does work around affordable housing. He wasn't trying to suicide bomb into a bunch of cops. But let's say he did have some kind of scanner. You don't get to crack his skull open. You just don't.
Yep.
Not in any country I want to live in anyway.
Yep.
Excited to welcome back to the program after a few months to give us an update on the campaign in the last stretch before the New York primaries. Candidate for New York's 9th District, Isiah James, welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. It's great to be here under the circumstances.
Exactly. Both of us in our homes, not necessarily where we expected to be at this particular point, but before we went live, we were talking a bit about some of the struggles of running a race, and the last time we spoke was long before this. So tell me a little bit about how you've had to adapt your campaign to, the new situation where some of the traditional ways you'd be running just aren't available to you or aren't safe.
Well, I mean, everything has basically moved online. I mean, literally from every ad, every video, it's all online. We don't have any human contact because New York, the whole country was on pause. And for me, my strongest suit is campaigning, is getting out there, talking to the people. And the grassroots campaign is all about getting out there and taking your message to the people. And when you literally can't do that by order of the governor, it makes it really difficult to compete. And another thing, raising money for a grassroots candidate when folks are broke is really, really hard because we don't have PAC donations or lobbyist donations. We don't have rich donors. We have literally, the delivery driver, the teacher who chips in $5 and $10. And it's hard for me as somebody who's a working class guy, whose wife is a teacher, to ask people, hey, can you give me $27? Knowing what we're all going through. Yeah. So it's been a struggle all around.
Yeah, I can only imagine. We're an independent organization. We face the same thing. It's like we don't want to fall apart as some media companies are, but we also feel terrible asking people. We know, 40 million people are out of work. But to that, you've been campaigning while the response has been going on. I am interested in your opinion of how both the federal response in terms of where the money has gone, what you think about that. But I'm also curious, being a New Yorker, what do you think about the way that the pandemic and some of the recent protests, what the New York response has been to that?
Well, let's start at the federal level. The federal response has been abysmal, absolutely abysmal. Our federal leadership they literally they're ostriches with their hands in the dirt. Thank God for the few people, the Dr. Anthony Fauci's and the director of the CDC, who, had a modicum of sway on our current commander in chief to try to at least nudge him in the right direction. Mm-hmm. The Defense Production Act, we could have been rolling out ventilators. Thousands of more people could be alive right now. We could have told industry, hey, we need PPE and we need it now. We need tests. We could have used the Defense Production Act to ramp up. Think about this. In World War II, we were turning out a bomber, a B-24 bomber every hour. A bomber is huge. We could have used the industry of America to save thousands of more lives, number one. Number two, had we shut down the damn country when the experts told us to, thousands of more people would have been alive right then and there. And number three, had we had a coordinated federal response. Listen, the first thing they teach you going in the Army is you don't go into battle with 50 different plans. That's why we have a structure and a chain of command. If we actually had one of those in place, one person overseeing all of this stuff who can delegate to other people below them, then the response would have been more swift and a lot better. That's number one. On the state side of it, we had the same damn thing in New York. It was people with their heads in the sand. I remember the governor and the mayor were arguing about when to close schools. We're not going to close schools. We're going to close schools. Like, really? And meanwhile, teachers are getting sick and dying in our community. You can go back and look up the clips. The governor saying, this is not going to be that bad. Go about, live your life. It's all okay. Same thing with the mayor. And at that time, John, you can look on my Twitter. I was publicly saying, no, shut this down. If you know anything about a virus, it does not move linear. It moves exponential. And in New York City, where 8.5 million people live ass to elbow, it's going to spread really, really fast. But our leaders were inept, and it cost lives.
Yeah. Tragically. And of course, continues to. It's not, as big of a news story, but of course, about 1,000 people are still dying every day. And we're hoping that as things reopen, we won't see us dip back into that that same situation. Obviously, another big issue that's been dominating the news is the protests around police brutality. And I know that you have a background of community activism around some of these issues involving criminal justice and things like that. I'm curious how that's affecting your campaign, how it's influenced your platform, your experience in these areas.
Well, I'm proud to say that it hasn't influenced my platform because we've been talking about this since day one. We haven't jumped on the bandwagon of criminal justice reform and, justice and equality for everybody. Folks can go back and look from day one. Some of the first videos we put out in this campaign, we were talking about these things because for me, as a 6'8" Black man, I know what it's like to look like a suspect when you walk out of the front door. And I'm a decorated veteran. So this stuff is lived experiences. We've been talking about this. What has encouraged me by these protests is I'm seeing the milieu of New York. I'm seeing Black, white, brown, old, young, affluent, rich, poor. I'm seeing everybody coalesce and say, listen, what happened to George Floyd wasn't just one officer with his knee on the neck of a man. Mm-hmm. What happened to George Floyd was the entire system of racist criminal justice on the necks of Black people for hundreds of years in this country. And finally, those cries are now being heard. And once the people have woken up, you can't put them back to sleep because no matter what, this will be written about in history. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm 33, but I've never seen anything like this where all over the entire world, that one man sparked his death, his murder, wasn't a death, he was murdered. His murder sparked an awakening and a consciousness in people that Black people have been screaming about in our echo chamber of pain for the last 400 years. And now the world is starting to see what we were talking about.
Yeah. You've talked about your background in this area, and I know there's obviously a lot that differentiates you between you and the current incumbent. I know in this area, you've stressed that through all of the years that Yvette Clarke has held this position, she hasn't actually sponsored any legislation to deal with this area of policy. Do you think that that's something that now people will be focusing more on, considering what's going on?
I would hope so. I mean, one of the biggest problems we have in not just New York City, but all over the country is something called the 1033 program. It allows the Pentagon to sell billions of dollars of surplus military equipment to police departments across this nation. So let's look at the system here. My member of Congress takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the defense industry, from defense contractors. When they get those new contracts for government equipment to build, where do you think their surplus equipment goes? It goes right to states like New York, right to states like Florida and Washington and Michigan. So she is part of the problem. She is literally shoveling the dirty coal into the big Leviathan that is the military industrial complex, which spills over into our racist criminal injustice system. It trickles down into Black and brown communities. And she is Black herself. And I don't understand that. Why is this so hard to understand? It's my job as a candidate to connect the dots of how that dirty money is planted as a seed and how it matures into the tree of oppression that people live under every single day. And she has no remorse about it. She says she never took a purity test. So listen, people, I always say, if your integrity can be bought for a $2,800 donation, that's between you and your God, but mine can't.
Yeah. There's one other area I wanted to ask, considering your background. You've served in the military. We've had instances where Trump has deployed the National Guard. There's been obviously not just talk about, militarization of the police, of this equipment being sent to Iraq, but then coming home and being used by police around the country, but also the potential role for the military in putting down these protests. As someone who's obviously very supportive of the goals of the protests, has served in the military, what do you think about this use of the military, whether in fact or just in rhetoric, that the right is saying that it might be necessary to quell the protests?
Well, in fact and in rhetoric, it is both utterly disgusting and wrong. That's number one. Number two, I understand what the internal pain that the people are having when they're inside the military. Once you sign on that dotted line, you literally sign your life away. Mm-hmm. There is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of dissent. If they give you an order and you don't do it, you will go to jail right then and right there. I've seen it happen a million times. So I understand the internal consternation that they have. But me being on the outside now, I can speak about it. Hell no, we shouldn't use the military. First of all, what about, you can't just suspend posse comitatus. You can't just suspend, the Third Amendment. I don't think Trump's ever read the Constitution, number one, but other lawmakers should know that this is illegal. You can't use the military as police. He might try to bring up the Insurrection Act that George Washington used or something like that. But these are old, antiquated laws that were used to put down slave rebellions.
Yeah.
That's basically what this is. So we have a standing military. So we don't need police with military equipment, number one. And number two, no governor at all should deploy the National Guard, because Trump does not have control over the National Guard. That's states.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has control over the regular active duty military. And I would hope that my brothers and sisters who are still in uniform would know not to carry out these orders. They are lawful or they're unlawful. They are illegal. Do not do it.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. Where can people find out more about your campaign, your experience, and your platform?
Well, folks can go to IsiahforCongress.com, ISIAH, or Congress.com, and they can read my platform, my life story, all that stuff. They can sign up to volunteer for us, and all the same social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Isiah James for the 9th District, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and stay safe.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.